Hey everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Year of the Man Summit. If you don't know who I am, my name is Elise Micheals, and I've been a men's mental health coach for the last 2 years, helping men find purpose and passion again by healing their subconscious trauma. So I started this summit as a way to give back to the men, to provide tools for mental health, access to coaches and resources that they don't really have because there is so much adversity when it comes to that. So we're really lucky. We have 7 coaches, 7 days of free content for you guys. All 7 days are free. The recordings are available for 24 hours after. But if you want access to the coaches, the creators, to ask them questions after, if you want access to the recordings forever, please make sure to buy VIP. It's only $97. You get to stay after, ask Dylan some questions, ask the rest of the creators questions. Saley will drop that in the chat so that you can buy if you haven't yet. But other than that, this summit is specifically designed to help men become better fathers, leaders, spouses, and men in general. There's no other summit like it, and we are so happy to have you here. And with that being said, we're going to welcome Dylan Sessler to the stage. Dylan is an Army vet. He has overcome depression, PTSD, anxiety, and so much more pain in his life, but more than what he has overcome. Today, we're going to talk about what he has done with all of that, what he's doing with all of that. And he's going to talk to you guys about how you can take your own pain and alchemize it into something beautiful, something valuable, something useful. So thank you so much, Dylan, for being here. I'm really excited to hear your story, and over to you.
Thank you, Elise. And, I can't thank you enough for kind of giving me this, this moment or this opportunity to kind of talk to you all. But I wanted to start this with a question. And it was kind of a question that at one time in my life, it was something that I had to really face myself. And so before you get to hear my story, I want you to answer this in your mind right now. If you knew you had 40, 50, 60 years left to live, you knew you had all that time to live, would you continue to live your life the same way you've been living up until now? And I just want you to think about that. I want you to kind of take that in for a moment. That question forces you to address 2 things, I think. I think it forces you to address who you've created right now, this identity that you've built within yourself and throughout the years of your life, making you who you are now. And it also forces you to look forward at the identity you wish to create. And that question, for some people and for myself specifically, can be very hard to address. Throughout my life, I've been through many different things, as Elise kind of alluded to, but when you start to actually look at those things and you start to put things together, it's very easy to become remarkably negative about your future, about how you create identity, because of mostly how people teach you to think or how people force you to think. There's not a lot of emphasis on how people actually are allowed to think and offered the opportunity to kind of create their own identity for themselves that other people don't judge or other people don't kind of suppress within you. So, I'm gonna give you some context about my story and kind of help you understand, where I've taken this. Because right now I'm a mental health coach as well as Elise. I work with men and women on trying to help people discuss the difficult things that they don't know how to discuss, how to identify the problems in their lives, and how to work towards an identity in the future that they never thought they could actually have. And realistically, my story starts at 6 years old. At 6 years old, I lost my father to suicide. And more importantly about that moment was the recognition that I knew he wasn't coming back. At 6 years old, I just had that feeling, that intuition of understanding that the person in front of me wasn't going to come home. Whatever that was, I've never really been able to put a strong understanding of how I knew, because I was so young and the memories have faded by then or by now. That feeling was remarkably deep, though. And that recognition in that moment made me reach out and hold him and tell him not to leave. And so when he did leave, when I watched him walk away, and when I ultimately learned the next day that he had committed suicide, it scarred me, right? It was trauma, for all intents and purposes. It was a moment in my life where I felt that I had to place guilt upon myself. I had to place shame upon myself for not doing, for not stopping him, for not reaching out and holding him back more. And at 6 years old, these are all rational feelings, but they're not always logical, as we all know. As many of you would look at that and say that's not fair to yourself to do so. But it's a rational feeling, and it's something, I look at rationality as very simple. Rationality is the idea that every feeling you've ever felt is valid. That doesn't necessarily make it logical. It just makes it valid. And when you start looking at those emotions and recognizing how powerful they are, if you dismiss them, you suppress them. And when you start suppressing emotions and we start suppressing feelings that are fundamentally valid at the time, you start to create a separate identity that has to survive the world rather than be the person that you want to be. And that's where my story really begins. Is I didn't recognize that at first. I didn't recognize that at 6 years old. I didn't have the capacity to, and it sent me down a very difficult road. And, I'll skip a lot of the parts, but basically it got me to a point in 2015 where I put a gun to my own head, and I nearly committed suicide myself. Even after 19 years of telling myself I would not become my father. And I'm sure a lot of people that are listening to this right now have recognized those feelings, have been in that place where I don't feel like I can go on. I don't feel like I am providing any value to people. I don't think I'm worthy of anything. I don't think I'll ever find love. I don't think I'll ever be able to love. There's so many different things that can create that disconnection. And that's the reality, is that, you look at suicide and people like to talk about suicide and dive in and say suicide's a problem. But let's be honest, suicide isn't the problem. It's the result. It's the result of a culmination of just about everything that has happened in your life, to a point where you are trying to overcome these things, but nobody's supporting you, or nobody's allowing you to speak, or no one's allowing you to actually express what you need to express. And so it becomes silence, especially for men, right? Like I never felt like I had anyone to talk to. And even when I went to, I was offered therapy as a child twice, I didn't talk, right? And I can imagine there's a lot of people in here that have been through that, have felt that, that feeling of wanting to express yourself, but not having anyone that can understand it. Because that's very easy for men, because who else is really going to understand what we've been through when we're taught to have to be violent, have to be aggressive, have to be emotionally suppressive, right? We have to be silent, but strong. We have to maintain pain management, right? We can't feel pain. We can't feel anything. And it becomes a really difficult path forward to start creating identity when you have all of these rules in place from society and from the people around us that, Robert says it very well, when it feels like no one cares. It's really important, within my story is just it's simply an example, right? But that doesn't make it perfect for you. And that's the really important part when we talk about this question of, if you had 40, 50, 60 years left, would you live the same life that you're living right now? And if the answer is no, what's holding you back? Right? That question of digging deeper and understanding who you are and who you've had to be is so fundamentally important, but we're afraid of it, right? My question to you is, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of getting into a situation where you actually have to address the people that taught you how to be this person that you are? Because at some point you didn't have a choice of who you were. You had to be the man that you had to be to get everything done and to survive. And maybe your mother or your father forced you to remain silent, even though you wanted to cry or you wanted to feel. It's so important that when we have these discussions about mental health and we have these discussions about suicide, is that we're actually starting to dig into the actual real problems and not just sitting here and addressing the bullshit of, are you feeling like you want to commit suicide? Well, yeah, obviously, right? That's not the question here. Is we need to dig deeper. We need to dive deeper into our identities and why we had to survive, what we had to survive, and who we had to survive, and it's, yeah. Elise, go ahead.
No, I really wanted to jump in there, right? Because you said so many beautiful and painful things that a lot of men, I think, are resonating with right now. And one of the things that I wanted to go back to was, you said men are taught to be aggressive, to be violent. And I've wanted to make a post on this for a long time, but the fear of like, what will people say if she says men are taught to be, but I've said it once before and I'll say it again. Men are taught to suffer, like to enjoy their own pain and their own suffering. And because they're taught not to talk about their feelings, not to be sad, that's weakness, and work harder and do more and be better. And so pain becomes your only sense of emotion or feeling. And that's not right.
No, it's not. I think my soiree with pain really came when I was around 8 or 9 years old, when I met the first man after my father, right? And this man beat me with a belt that was about, it was one of those thick Western belts, sometimes studded, sometimes not, depending on which one he would use. And he would hit me from the small of my back all the way down to my calves, pretty much. And I still remember, there were days where I would have to go to school and I couldn't sit down on my butt because it hurts so bad. So I'd have to sit on my hip, and I would end up sitting sideways and sitting awkwardly. And I still remember having to live with that. But the moment I recognized that pain was something I could manage was the day I started looking at him and recognizing I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry. And that was a transformative moment. That was a core memory for me. And that was a really big struggle to sit there and look at this person that was beating me, and living with that. Beyond that is a moment of recognition throughout my life that I could handle more pain than a lot of people. And it was because I was trained to. I was not only was my father's death really part of that, but also this moment where this man was beating me for things that didn't need to be utilized. Like, that kind of punishment didn't need to be utilized. And I know that now because I'm a father myself, and I watch my son grow up, and he's my stepson. I've known him since he was 4, and he's 10 now. So I've had him for 6 years. I've never put a hand on him. I've never hurt him. Right. And he respects me. And so the ability to know that you do not need to beat a child to help him understand how to survive in the world and how to be respectful in the world is something that was lost on my generation and many generations before me. And it's really remarkable to see that And it's also really sad to see that, because we were taught as men that you have to endure pain, you have to face pain. And we were taught how to face pain in a way that was detrimental to us. You do, like, let's be real, you do have to face pain, you do have to endure pain, but you don't have to do it without emotions. If you want to emotionally regulate, and if you want to do it in a healthy way, you have to be able to say, I can feel this. And I can also understand that if people judge me, that's their fucking problem. And realistically, like the things that I talk about, the things that we talk about are emotional, right? Your body needs to feel that. Your body needs to have that expression, that emotional expression. I think there's two different kinds of expression. There's venting and there's expression, right? Venting is getting off your chest all of the unnecessary stuff you just don't want to carry anymore. Expression is getting off your chest the necessary things you need to share, the necessary things you need to express and talk about, and let them be in the space of where they are, right? Like if me and Elise are in a coaching relationship and she's my coach, what we create here is a place of safety, right? Because every person in the world needs a place of safety. Because if you don't have a place of safety, you will never express what needs to be expressed, and your body will hang on to all of the trauma, all of the pain, all of the suffering that you've ever had to go through. It'll be stuck within yourself. And I guarantee you right now, if you've ever been through trauma, if you've ever been through pain, there are probably places on your body right now, and you can kind of close your eyes and kind of think about this. There's probably places on your body that you can actually recognize where you store pain, right? For a lot of people, it's in their stomach, it's in their abdomen, it's in their chest. For others, it's going to be, some of my combat veterans out there, it's going to be the place where you were injured, right? It might be your head. There's going to be very specific points in where you store your stress, right? For me, it's my forehead. It's like I store all of my stress up in my forehead for some reason. And it's a difficult thing to face if you don't understand it. The more you express, the more you openly have these emotional discussions that are perfectly manly, right? I can attest to this. The more you start to feel like you have value outside of just providing, right? Because it's not about pain anymore. It becomes about connection. One of the things that I notice most of all, right, and I do a lot of discussions about suicide in my military career. I've been in the Wisconsin National Guard for about 14 years, and I've been doing suicide prevention discussions for about 2 or 3 years now. One of the things I notice is that when I ask the question of where does suicide come from, people can list 1,000 different things because it can come from 1,000 different places. But of all of those things, one thing I think they all share in common, and that's disconnection. When you are creating relationships, if those relationships are based within disconnection, you are more likely to commit suicide. Why? Because humans thrive off communication. They thrive off connection. Our emotions are fundamentally built within us to communicate with each other. When I express something, Elise has the ability to recognize what I'm trying to say if she's tuned into it. But if there's disconnection on her end or disconnection on my end, then we're not communicating. We're not having a real conversation. And when we talk about these real conversations, where the disconnection often lies is how we define our communication, right? I think one of the biggest things you're going to see is that in the absence of language, if you don't have a good vocabulary, if you don't have a good vernacular for how you are trying to discuss the problem that you're discussing, what happens is you communicate non-verbally, and oftentimes that becomes aggressive. That returns to the place that you know the best, right? And for men, it's aggression, it's violence, it's pain management, it's suppression. It's all of these common things that men go through, right? And women women are in the same boat with different reactions. And so it's very important to start looking at your identity. How do you define your values? How do you define what you've been through? Do you actually have a working vocabulary in understanding yourself? Can you openly discuss these things? Because if you can't, well, guess what? You're going to react in the way that you reacted as a child. You're going to react in a way that is emotionally explosive and not emotionally regulated. And it's these kinds of discussions that coaches like myself and coaches like Elise have with guys. You know, we define values, we define principles, we define the rules of your life. And if you've never done that, guess what? You're creating disconnection in your relationships, and it's fundamentally hurting you, you know? And I'm sure, Elise, you can probably attest to that.
Yeah. I mean, everything that you're saying is like straight from the trauma therapy handbook. So it's really funny because you told me that you had never taken a class on this, but when you're saying all of this, the foundation for healing trauma is relationship, because as I explained actually in a session earlier today that I had, when we're babies, we rely on other people to take care of our needs. So we actually have a relational need before a self-care need. People are like, I can do things by myself. I don't need anyone. And that's just denying the biology that you are born with. We do need people. And that is why, like you said, it's so important to have someone who you can create that safe connection with. Like, you're very attuned. I practice being attuned. People who are trauma therapy aware or trauma aware or communication attuned aware. And that's why sometimes, you know, we go to our friends or our family and we still feel alone, because those people most likely are not attuned, because we are also our environment, right? So when you're trying to reach out, you know, anybody here who's struggling or just wants to do some introspection, try to find a coach or someone who is attuned, someone who understands these skills, because what happens is people will try to go to a therapist or try to go to their friend or their parent or something, and they'll feel rejected or they don't feel a connection because that person doesn't have the tools to create that connection, that safe space that you need to be able to start that exploration process.
Yeah. And it's so, you know, what people, you know, I've built a platform of over 540,000 followers now on TikTok. And all I talk about is suicide and mental health and how all of these things impact you, right? It's genuine, right? It's authentic. It's real, right? I don't sugarcoat anything, right? And, you know, Elise, again, can attest to that. Like, I don't bullshit with people, because I spent 19 years of my life dealing with the very same things that many of you are dealing with. I dealt with the silence. I didn't tell anybody after my dad died for 19 years that I thought about suicide every single day. I had suicide ideation for 19 years plus some, because after 2015, I had to change, right? You know, when I put that gun to my head, I had to recognize within that moment, wow, what I'm doing right now is something that I don't need to do. What I need to do, and I had to think about this for 3 days, is I had to speak. I had to hold myself accountable. And if I wasn't going to do it, I had to put it in someone else's mind that I was going through something, because I had never allowed myself to see or show people or reveal to people what my troubles were, what my struggles were. So what I did was, after those 3 days of kind of contemplation and figuring out what just happened, why did I just do that? And that took me down the whole road of going back to 6 years old and understanding, you know, why the guilt and the shame had silenced me, because I didn't know how other people would take that. And that just expanded. It was exponential growth of what that shame and that guilt did to me, you know. And when you start recognizing those pieces, that divergence of who you wanted to be to who you had to be to survive, you start having the ability to say, this isn't what I want to be. This isn't what I want to do. And I can create identity for who I want to be. I have to own what happened to me. I have to own the choices I made following that, right? I'm no saint. I made mistakes. I've made mistakes throughout my life, but I'm here. And now I'm whether I'm atoning for them or not, I don't give a fuck, right? What I am doing is I'm trying to give men, women, children the opportunity that I never had, right? The opportunity to hear from someone's mouth who actually survived these things, who actually went through these things, who went through the domestic violence, who went through the bullying, right? Who went through war and combat, and who lost parents to suicide, anyone who's ever been through any kind of trauma, to give them an opportunity to understand before it gets too late, before, looking back almost, just almost 7 years now. If you're getting anything out of this discussion, right? 7 years ago, I actually keep this around, but this is the bullet, right? This is the round that almost took my life. And I'm going to get emotional here because that's important when we have this discussion, is that this is a representation of what could have taken me from this planet. And if you're not willing to look that deeply, if you're not willing to share what you need to share, if you're not willing to take these emotions and have them come to the forefront of your life, you're going to end your life in one way or the other, right? You're going to end your life with a gun, with alcohol, with drugs, with whatever it is that you have at hand. You will do it, right? And you don't have to, right? You can create connection. You can create a relationship with yourself first and a relationship with others as well, so that you can change where you're going. I promise you, I believe that every single person can do it. Is every single person willing to? That's up to them. And I can't determine that for you. I can't fix you. I can't save you. What I can do is I can show you what happened for me, what helped me. I can show you how to start looking at yourself and start showing you a different kind of perspective than what you've developed for yourself. I can show you different paths around the issues that you face every single day. And the same for Elise. Elise can do this as well. But the only person that will be there for yourself 100% of your life is you. And that is a fact. That is a fact that will never change. Your mom won't be there. Your dad won't be there. Your wife won't be there. Your sons and your daughters will not be there for you 100% of your life. Only you will. And so it's so fundamentally important that you start to look at yourself as a person that can express. If you don't know how, that can be fixed. If you don't know how to create relationships, that can be fixed. If you don't know how to overcome the failures or the mistakes or the things that you have done that have hurt people, I promise you, that can be fixed. Can you fix or mend relationships? Not always. And you have to live with those consequences, but that doesn't mean you have to end your life because of those consequences. It means that you have to find a way to own that part of your identity and live with it and understand how to move forward with it for yourself. And I mean, I could keep talking for hours about this, but yeah, I'll let Elise take over for a minute.
Well, thank you so much, Dylan, for sharing that piece of your life with us and being so genuine and honest. And I think we've discussed this before. It's why we get along so well, right? Because we're not afraid to talk about the ugly. And I made a post today that, there's that saying, man is afraid not of his failure, but of the success that he could have. And I thought about that yesterday, and man is not afraid of his success. Everybody loves to succeed. Man is afraid of his own darkness, his ability to destroy, because when you have power, you don't just do good with it. You have the ability to tear worlds apart. And I think that's where a lot of men are also afraid, not just to live up to their greatness, but to start the healing journey. And even recently, I started coaching with someone who was ready to be on the healing journey, so they said. And as we're diving into it, you get to the point where you start making breakthroughs and they quit. And that was heartbreaking for me, right? Because initially you're like, what did I do to cause this? And I'm not saying that I'm not at fault, but when you really dive deep, if you're not ready to face the deep inner workings, like you said, you have to go back. I mean, you being a coach and you having gone through all this stuff, do you believe you can actually overcome any of that without looking back to that moment at 6 years old, without looking back to the pain? I mean, I'm not saying we have to bring it up every day, but without addressing it, at least.
I think what needs to be addressed most of all is the traumatic reaction to it. Do you need to go back? Because not everybody can go back, right? I think that's an important understanding to recognize, is that not everybody remembers everything that they've been through. And so what you need to do is understand your body. You need to connect with your body, right? And there's a question: what if you don't even feel like you are not there for yourself? I want to address that. You have to become self-aware. I think that's step one, is you have to become aware of what your body's actually telling you, what your body's actually speaking to you, right? Now, there's a moment, 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, where you guys saw me become emotional. And in a lot of places, a lot of men would have said, hold up, I'm going to stop, right? And for a long time, I had to do that, right? Like, I wasn't ready to have people watch me become emotional, because that's super uncomfortable. But when I really figured out who I was, when I really figured out what my message was that I wanted to share with the world, how I wanted to provide value to the world, I had to recognize that my emotions were not going to come in front of my conviction to myself, right? Because I told myself, when I start this journey of understanding myself, I can't be dishonest. I can't. And to me, stopping myself from feeling emotions is dishonesty. That's part of my definition now. And I had to fundamentally build that, because if I didn't, I would become dishonest again. I was dishonest for 19 years and I didn't tell anybody about it, and it nearly killed me. And I think that's so powerful, is that when you start reconnecting with the physical body and the mind, you start actually becoming there for yourself. You actually start recognizing what your body's trying to tell you. And it's not always trying to tell you to stop. Sometimes it's actually telling you to keep going and allow yourself to feel, allow yourself to let this stuff out, right? It's not about suppression. It's about regulation, right? Suppression is dropping a Mentos bottle in a Coke and locking it away until it explodes, right? Regulation is shaking that Coke bottle up and then cracking the lid to where it slowly seeps out, and then you can open it without it exploding, right? It's about allowing these things to let themselves out and to feel and to understand what that feeling really means. And it's really important. I think you can reconnect with those feelings without attacking it. I think it's a lot easier to go back and actually address everything surrounding that situation and bring it forward and understand, how did it impact, right? Linearly, how did it impact the rest of your life? Because it's really easy for me to trace back from 6 years old to 25 years old, how I got to that place. When I really thought about it, I understood. It was simple, right? It was disconnection after disconnection, to a point where I became so disconnected, I was disconnected with myself. And I that question, like, I was not there for myself, and I had to become there for myself, and I had to do the work, and I had to put in the effort to understand who I am and understand what my body was actually telling me when it's sitting there trying to communicate with me. If you feel stuff, your body's talking to you, and you've got to be able to translate that. And that's where the vocabulary comes in. That's where the nonverbal communication comes in. That's where understanding what the aggression is really telling you, and the violence and the emotional suppression, the pain management, the silence, all of it is trying to tell you something. Some of it's become habitual, and so you have to rethink it. You have to dig deeper into it, and it's really important to dive into that stuff.
Wow. Absolutely. Thank you so much for explaining self-regulation. This is exactly what I teach my clients in the group coaching and in individual coaching. And, you know, we have to practice it as coaches when our clients are talking to us as well. So even when you were tearing up, I had the tears in my eyes, obviously, because it's emotional. We can't help it, right? Something is so powerful, but I have to practice like the deep breathing. Even myself, like even though we're both coaches, I'm still attuning, because it's the best way to support people. And learning that system for myself was also what saved me. So I just really appreciate you for talking about it, because that's the logical, that's the scientific. It's something that even if you're someone who's not comfortable with emotions yet, you can understand that emotional responses are physiological first. And if you can disrupt the physiological response, you can disrupt the emotional response, recognize it, put a name to it, have yourself be able to pause. So that was so beautiful. As we come to an end of the session before we go to VIP, is there any last words that you would say to people who want to turn their pain into purpose?
Yeah, find balance, right? It's everything that I've come to understand, right? It's not, I used to think it was peace. I used to think it was happiness, and then I thought it was peace, and now I think it's balance, because we're not always going to be at peace. Sometimes we're going to go to war, and you've got to understand that how you go to war, is also a determination of how happy you come out of it, right? And so I like to think it's balance. I look at power as mastery of consciousness. It's the ability to self-correct without self-destructing. I think of it as self-appreciation without becoming arrogant. I think of conflict resolution as both internal and external, right? We have to be able to balance this understanding of, I have needs and other people have needs. I have self-respect and I respect other people. It's balancing what those emotions are trying to tell us. And sometimes, with regulation also says, no, that's not a logical feeling. And you have to sometimes think through that and process that and understand that to help yourself come back into balance. And for many people, right, and let's talk about men specifically. If you're hyper aggressive, if you're violent, if you're angry, if you're whatever, if you're any of that stuff, you might have to push to the other side of the spectrum to understand where your balance is, right? Does that mean become soft? No, but you might have to engage in soft behaviors, right? I say soft as a in quotations, because it's not soft, right? There's times where I hug my son, right? I embrace my son. I allow my son to cry, right? Because that's a behavior that he needs to understand is safe with me, right? Is it safe with other people? Not always. And it's important to help him understand that balance as well. This is a safe place for you to feel, but not every place is safe for you to feel. And being realistic about it allows you to understand how to balance things better and say, okay, I can't feel, right? Like I go back to the old understanding of war, right? I can't feel things at war, because if I do, there are times where that puts lives at risk. It might put my life at risk. So I have to shut things down. And when I come home, that's where I find balance again. That's where I come back to peace and I start creating again the balance. And I've been to war twice now, and I come home each time. It's a hard thing to come back from. And so it's not impossible, but finding balance is to me the possibility that is most achievable by everybody. And so that's what I would say.
Amazing. I love that. And I love how you pointed out too that, there are certain situations where feeling isn't the most appropriate thing, but the point is you can choose. You can choose. Your emotions don't just have control over you, because even if you're someone who shoves emotions down, you're running from them, they also have control over you because you are afraid of them. You don't face them. You don't know how to approach them. So that is the end of the session. Before we jump into VIP, guys, if you want to ask Dylan questions, if you want to have the recordings, remember to purchase VIP. Other than that, I appreciate you guys. Love you guys. Everybody who's not in VIP, please make your exit, and I will see you tomorrow. That's my night where I'm speaking about purpose and passion as well. So excellent. And we'll just hang out here, Dylan, until everybody comes in. And everybody who is in VIP, if you can please type your questions in the chat, just so that we can have a really nice congruent kind of Q&A. I'll just read the questions to Dylan so that he can answer, just for time's sake and everything like that. And we'll go from there. So we'll just start recording. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to the VIP section of the Year of the Man Summit. We've got Dylan Sessler here. We are going to have a Q&A where participants are asking their questions. And until they type their questions in the chat, I'm going to ask him some questions, because he has some amazing tactics, tips, and tools for healing trauma, overcoming depression, anxiety, etc. And we have a very similar coaching style. I don't know if it's just in like our Wisconsin roots, but what's going to be awful is if I say the word bag or bagel or whatever, you will not be able to tell me if I'm saying it wrong. Like, we'll just be saying these things entirely wrong, right? Everybody listening is going to be like, what did they just say? Bag?
What do you say?
Oh boy, dear.
Oh my God. Gotta love Wisconsin.
Oh my goodness. So anyway, actually, that is actually a question I would like to kind of dive into, just revolving upbringing and environment. And this is like a broad thing. There's no statistics on here, so don't quote me on this, but I feel like a lot of people from the Midwest have similar upbringings with parents and alcoholism, or parents who are there. Like, it's because it's kind of like a middle-class upbringing where they support the family, but they're not present. You have beers and you're kind of just checked out as a parent. And I feel like that's really affected us as a generation, because that was my experience. It was kind of like raising myself, because my parents weren't there. And you had said you kept everything bottled up for 19 years. I actually tried telling my parents that I was depressed. So I told my mom, I said, I'm so depressed, like I'm sad every day. And she said, I know, but I'm trapped in my own sadness. I can't help you, like straight up. And then I was crying to my dad once, and he told me to shut up. Like, you're fine. And so that is what caused me to lock everything inside and think everybody just likes happy Elise. That's all they want. That's all they care about. And that, like, I had suicidal thoughts all the way from when I was young up until like 25.
Right. And that's, I think you're right. I think alcohol has a huge impact on one society, but it also has such a huge impact on the families that deal with alcoholism and the kind of what alcohol does to interaction, right? Like, I think parents tend to become distant. They become disconnected. Does that mean alcohol is bad? I mean, I haven't seen many studies that make alcohol seem like a good thing. And so it's a really difficult situation to address, especially in Wisconsin, right? Because there's more bars per capita in Wisconsin than there are like churches or something like that. I mean, like there's like between 1 and 4 bars in every town in Wisconsin, minimum.
There were 3 just in my 2,000 population town.
Right.
Like,
and yeah, I mean, and after my dad's suicide, that was a point where I was like, I'm never going to do drugs. I'm never going to drink alcohol. I'm never going to do tobacco, and I'm never going to commit suicide. And I've held to those rules in Wisconsin, in the infantry, in two of the most alcoholic rich environments that you could probably come up with. I've managed to stay sober my entire life and never had, I don't have any problems with anybody drinking, but at the same time, I'll never do it. And I think that honestly saved my life in many ways. I think if I had taken alcohol as a coping mechanism, I don't think I would have made it. If I'm being perfectly honest, I just know my personality. My guess is I would have ended my life a lot sooner than 25, especially in the military. But yeah, I mean, alcohol's it's a tough subject, and I don't, what do you do about it?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a few questions here that I'm going to dive into, but I just want to comment on that because it's another similarity that you and I have is I was like, I'm never doing any drugs or alcohol ever.
Yeah.
And I actually broke that when I turned 25 because I realized that was my breaking point was I need to change who I am in life. I had a bad breakup and I said, I need to change like my patterns. What is something that I've been attached to that defines me, that has defined me my entire life? And I'm like, well, I said would never do drugs or alcohol. And I'm like, that can't be a bad thing because that is a good thing. But for me, I had to dive into why that was for me. And it was the fear that if I was going to try this, I was going to lose control. I was going to be an alcoholic. I was going to be a horrible person. All of these things that I had associated with it. So, I mean, I went the opposite way. I forced myself to try it. Like it was so hard to just like take sips of alcohol because I had to fight all these demons. So for me, it wasn't like about the drinking. It was about fighting my own beliefs and being able to trust myself.
Yeah.
And once I was able to like realize I'm not going to lose control, that was like a wave just washed over me of like, I'm going to be okay. Yeah. Nothing is going to control me. Nothing is going to take me over. I have control of myself, not my past demons, not these substances. Like I'm going to be okay. And so
it's really
I just had to share that. Yeah, it's crazy because I went the total opposite way. Yeah. And now I have experienced getting drunk. I've never done any drugs or anything like that, but like I test myself so much more now to be open to like just the possibility that things can be different, right? So I don't want, this isn't about me, so I'm going to jump into the questions and ask you the questions.
Yeah.
So from Dan, he said, you mentioned that one needs to have a good vocabulary, and I believe that I do. But when my therapist asked me today to describe what I was afraid of about divorce, I couldn't put in words and I was not able to answer. How do you connect with yourself to be able to answer that type of question?
Well, context always matters, right? And that's the hard part about answering some of these questions is that context is going to matter so much with each question. I would say if you fear divorce or if you think you fear divorce, then clearly there's some form of neglect or abandonment or understanding of, trying to dive into what the understanding of fear really is. If you can't answer that question, then don't answer that question. Move on to a question you can answer. And I think one of the biggest questions you can answer is emotionally abusive wife with OCD. So there's context, right? Again, I'm going to continue this thought. Maybe I'll come back to that. But one of the things you can answer is, what do you value, right? And this is a big question because when you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, I value integrity, trust, love. Like you can pick these words, but you're not really understanding the purpose of this question. When I say, what do you value? Let me explain my values, right? I have 3 very strong values for myself, right? Empathy, learning, and integrity. Those 3 things define how I operate in the world, right? Empathy is, to me, it's defined. I've defined this very specifically for myself and how I act upon it. So empathy is listening to understand. So what my goal is to listen to understand what people are feeling, what people are going through. And in many ways, it's also observing. So I actually am watching people and listening to them. And what that does is that empathy informs learning, right? And that learning is focused around people. It's focused around connection. But that learning develops my integrity. I learn from people what is right and wrong, and what is right and wrong is it develops my understanding of empathy. Who do I listen to, right? It's right and wrong of me to listen to these kinds of people. If people are assholes to me, I tend to listen to them less. I do listen to them only to understand whether their message is actually coming from a place of pain or if it's coming from a place of maliciousness, right? Because there's a difference, right? You kind of know when people are being malicious if you really pay attention. But if it's coming from a place of pain, I might still be able to connect with them and have a conversation, right? In many ways, I have become a translator for what my body is trying to tell me. Learning fundamentally makes me feel better. Empathy fundamentally makes me feel better. Integrity fundamentally makes me feel better, right? These actions, doing what is right when no one's watching, makes me feel good about myself. Being empathetic to other people and learning who they are and understanding what they have gone through makes me feel better. And understanding those values and how they can be overused or underused, if you don't do that for yourself, you'll never be able to answer a question like that because you don't actually know what makes you feel good or bad, right? And so I think if you can't answer that question, right, dig into yourself, then answer the question. Define your life, define the things that your body tells you it values. Because I promise you, if you look at a list of 200 values and you pick out 25 to 30, you'll narrow it down to a point where you can actually cluster them into about 3 to 5, right? Where like you might be responsibility, ownership, and accountability. Guess what? Those are all pretty much the same thing. You just need to define one of them and pick one, right? And you can start to understand who it is that you actually are, how you like to operate, how your body wants to operate, because your body has a say in this just as much as your mind does. And so ask those questions of yourself. How do I define these things that my body and my mind both value? And how can I start creating decision-making skills focused around how I operate with them? That is how I would attack that question, right? If you can't answer it, don't answer it. Don't kind of get stuck there.
Absolutely. I love that. And sometimes, like you said in the beginning, Dylan, it also helps to change the question. Sometimes it's not the fact that we don't have an answer. Sometimes it's just the wrong question, right? Like one thing that I would say is not what am I afraid of about divorce, but like first of all, what does divorce mean to me? Because if you're afraid of divorce, well, divorce has to mean something to you. Like you said, Dylan, that touches on your values. Maybe you don't know what those values are, but it means something to you to the point where you are afraid of it. Yep. So address that first, because that will lead you to all the other stuff. Right. And like Dylan said, that touches on your values. So great question there. I'd
like to add one thing to that, right? Like Elise kind of brought it up, is come back to things, right? Like I can't tell you how many times I had to go back to the situation that my father put me in 1996 when he killed himself. I've looked at that situation 100,000 times in my life, right? And continuously rebuild the narrative of what that was. When you're talking about trauma, when you're talking about, disconnection and these big problems that you're having, you're editing a book, you're writing it, and then you give it to the editor, and the editor's like, well, all of it sucks, rewrite it. And then, you're the editor. That's the thing. It's like you rewrite the book, and then they're like, half of the book sucks, rewrite that. And so you're going through this process of looking at the story, looking at the narrative, looking at the memories and the thoughts, and going back and actually addressing how each of these moments in these situations, how you functioned and how you understood it. Did you perceive it right? Did you perceive it wrong? And guess what? You're going to think you perceived it right. And then 2 years later, you're going to go back and you're like, wow, I just learned something that blows that out of the water. And so revisit these things, right? Revisit that question that Elise brought up. It's paramount to this process.
Love that. Okay. And that segues perfectly into Kelly's question. What are some steps we can take to get in tune with our emotions if we're not an emotional person?
You are an emotional person. That's the problem, right? Is that that's the first step, is stop telling yourself you're not an emotional person. You've never given yourself safety to be an emotional person, right? If you feel anything at all, you're an emotional person. Like, I promise you, it's looking, again, I'm always going to bring it up, is like looking at self-awareness and recognizing your body's saying things to you and you're just not listening, right? But it's not about ears. It's about feeling. It's about, like, sit down with yourself. I think this is a great exercise. Sit down with yourself, sit up. And what you're going to do is you're literally just going to focus on your diaphragm and breathe with your diaphragm, right? So you're going to push out your belly as you breathe in, and you're just going to breathe. And I want you to close your eyes and I want you to focus on your actual diaphragm and moving it in and out. And what you'll start to realize, especially if you're angry, if you're elevated, if you're aggressive in any way, you start doing this, you're going to calm down. And your body actually responds to how you're operating. What are you doing, right? You're literally calming your system down, and you're going to start pinpointing things about yourself, and you're going to start feeling like you have control. The more you do that, the more you're actually going to start focusing and pinpointing the emotions that you actually have, that you've been suppressing or denying or dismissing for so long because someone told you had to. And it's that simple. It's just sit with yourself, close your eyes, and just pay attention, right? I challenge you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I'm hearing you say too, and because two things in that, first of all, you just have to practice, right? Like, if you feel like you're not an emotional person, like you said, you are an emotional person. But like, what emotions are you just feeling like you're not experiencing, right? Because you're experiencing at some point some emotional thing during the day. Like, I'm sure you experience the good things, but you just don't want to experience the bad things. So like, what emotions are you running from?
Yeah.
And it boils down to, like you said, becoming in tune with your body, and also just practicing coming into tune with emotions. If you feel like you're not emotional, like, practice being emotional, practice. What does sadness feel like? Like, you have it within you.
Yeah.
You've just blocked it, and it feels uncomfortable, and you might not recognize what it is when you feel it because you shove it down. So it's like you said, Dylan, like in the earlier in the session, allow it to be what it is without judging it.
Yeah.
Allow it to come up without judging it.
And it's building the vocabulary in general. It's, you have more than one emotion, right? If you get angry a lot, that's an emotion. Anger is an emotion, but guess what? You have more than one emotion. Being content is an emotion, right? Being sad is an emotion. Being distraught, disgusted, right? There's so many emotions that, pick up a dictionary, right? Look up Google and look up a list of emotions and see if you can connect yourself with them. Most people can't name more than 12 emotions they feel in a day, right? So sometimes you're going to have to look outside of your box of what you understand is emotion and learn what really is emotion.
Love that. I love that so much. And Jerry has asked an amazing question. And I know I skipped over Poral's question, but we'll come back to that.
I think I
Jerry,
answered that already.
Yeah, kind of like in the mix of everything. So Jerry asked, Dylan, you talked about connection and disconnection with a brother in the military and numerous friends previously or currently serving. I find it difficult to connect or communicate with them on a deeper level since I've never been there. Any thoughts on how to connect with military friends since I'm looked at as a civilian? It's a fantastic question.
It's a hard question because, I can give you a response here of a way to connect with someone, but that doesn't necessarily mean they'll allow you to connect with them. Right. And that's the hard part about military is military guys do not want to connect with people for whatever reason. It's such a difficult.
They're taught not to.
Right. It's suffer in silence. We're literally trained that in basic training. And from the start of our training, we are forced. That's forced upon us. Right. You don't suffer, because if you're suffering, you're letting the team down. And so it's a demographic that's really hard to reach. If there's one thing I would say to attempt is offer safety, right? Start with that, right? I don't know what you've been through, and I'm not here to tell you what you've been through or tell you how to overcome what you've been through. I'm just here to listen, and I'm not going to take on your emotional, I'm not going to take on that baggage. You're not going to scare me. And you got to be genuine about this. If you're not genuine, you will not reach veterans. I promise you that. You have to be able to show them that you will not take it on yourself. You will not be a burden because they're sharing, and you have to prove that, right? And how do you prove that is you have to be there, right? You have to show them that you're willing to sit with them. And, in some ways, sometimes it's just going to be silent, right? Like, brother, I'm not leaving you. I'm just going to sit here with you. I don't care what you've been through. I'm not here to judge it. I'm here to just be a part of your environment, right? I'm here with you. I just need you to know that I'm here with you. And if you want to talk about it, you can. I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong. I'm not here to judge what you've been through. I'm just here to listen if you need me to. Offering that place of safety, again, it has to be authentic. It has to be genuine. I think that goes with anybody, but veterans more specifically. And again, there's no guarantee that they're going to share that, right?
Just going to say that too. Like, don't put it on yourself to, like, all we can do is all we can do, right? Create the safe space, like you said. But sometimes I think we get into this mode too, where we want to help so badly. We want to fix it. We want to take the pain away, because nobody wants to see people they love struggling, and especially people who have served for us. You want to take that pain away so badly, but you have to allow people the space to come to you. They have to be the first ones, because there are demons that they don't want to look at, and they're not going to want to tell you about it, so just give space, like you said. So I love that you brought that up, because we can be hard on ourselves. Like, how can I reach them? But it's not your job to reach. It's your job to just be still.
It's not your job to fix, and that's a hard thing for men, especially. It's not your job to fix, right? That goes for wives, that goes for children, that goes for veterans. It goes for people that are struggling. It's not your job to fix people. It can be your job to listen, right? It can be your job to support. And what support looks like depends on their perception of it. I can't express that importance enough. If you think your version of support is better for that person, you are fundamentally wrong, because it's not about what you can give. It's about what they are willing to allow you to give, what they allow you to share. Or, it's so important to pay attention to the needs of those who are suffering, and not force upon them what you think is right for them. That is one thing that I have a personal distaste for, is that people, this is why people have so much disconnection at times with the mental health system in general, is that there are therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists out there that will force upon them a solution that they're not comfortable with, but never have the discussion about that. And it turns people away. And that's why me and Elise have jobs, right? That's realistic. And I think that's important to address as well. Just don't force people your thoughts. Don't force people with your ideas. Allow them to come to them in a way. It's hard.
Yeah. Love that. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective from the military, because I also have a brother in the military, and we're totally disconnected because he's like 14 years older than me. But I've tried to have conversations with him, and at different times he'll tell me that he has no emotions, yet he writes these beautiful emotional stories that are just reflections of his childhood with our mother.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking, and that and it's like, for me, it's like, I wish I could just crack that egg. I wish I could just connect with my brother. I wish I could, now I'm getting emotional, right?
Feel it.
Wish I could have that, because like, that person is there. And when you feel like you can't reach them, you almost feel like a failure, right? But that's their journey. That's their journey. And you just have to love people for who they are, and not feel like it's any less, or like it's any more of your responsibility to fix them, because then you're assuming that they need to be fixed, right? Or that their life needs to be different. And that's also a mistake we can make as well. We want to fix people, but unless they come to you for help, they don't need to be fixed. They are living the life that they are choosing to live. And that's up to them. We're not the creators of perfect people and perfect lives.
Yeah.
So
there's no rule book that says what a perfect human being is.
yes,
That's a societal construct.
Yes. And that segues perfectly into Robert's question, which is, after understanding and articulating your thoughts, needs, and feelings, how do you deal with the external world that encourages most men to shut up and suck it up? I love this question.
You give them a respectful dose of what men are really good at: aggression. That's what I think, right? I talk on TikTok about all of these things that throughout my childhood were wrong to talk about, right? When I wanted to talk about suicide, it was shunned. It was shameful. Like, you do not talk about suicide, because that's when it becomes a problem, right? And so when people tell me I shouldn't talk about things, I look at what I understand. I make a decision, and if I disagree, I respectfully disagree. And I'm going to, respectfully but aggressively defend my position, right? I will always respectfully, aggressively defend how important emotions are for people. I will always aggressively and respectfully share what I need to share, because that's speaking my truth, right? Again, if I do the opposite, I'm being dishonest with myself. And so, do I always speak my mind right away? No, because I like to formulate my thoughts. But when I have a thought, when it's formulated, guess what? I'm going to defend it. I'm going to share what I think is right. But again, I think it's so important to maintain respect. Does that mean you can't do it aggressively? No, but I think it's important to say respectfully, because me and Elise might disagree on something at some point, and I'm going to defend myself, or I'm going to defend what I think is right. And I'm always going to treat her with respect. And I would hope she does the same. But even if she doesn't, I'm never going to look at her and disrespect her simply because she has a different view, because that view might actually have credence in 10 years when the science comes out and supports that. So I always assume that I'm wrong, and I always assume that everyone else is right. And we come to the conclusion together, or I then create an understanding that I think my option has more righteousness, and I don't want to disrespect this person by getting into a fight or getting into an argument. And I might have to say, you know what? I don't think this discussion is going anywhere. I've had this discussion with multiple clients. It's like, I don't think this discussion is worth what we're going to, and we don't have to push it that far. And it creates a healthy form of discussion, of debate and communication. And we need more of that in society right now. We do not need to be aggressively hateful. We need to be aggressively disagreeable, but respectfully disagreeable. So that's what I would say.
I love that. And I also would like to comment on that, maybe a little bit of a different perspective as well. If you're surrounded by an environment or the world, whatever, that says you have to be this way or you're not accepted, and that's not the truth, right? You're in this men's summit right now. You know that's not the truth, that you have to shut down your emotions. So this kind of ties into what Dylan says of, you know what your truth is, and you have to be convicted in the fact that that's the truth for you, and know that there are others who also see that as truth, and surround yourself with that environment, because the whole world does not dictate who you are as much as it encourages and forms us. It doesn't tell you what to do every day of your life. It doesn't tell you to be respectful. It doesn't watch you when you're sleeping and see like what your actions are in private. So it is up to you to say, I'm going to be this person. I'm going to be convicted in this truth, and know that I don't care what you have to say about me, because I need to actually live my life, and I refuse to suffer. That was me. It was like, I just don't want to suffer anymore. I don't give a shit what anybody thinks of me. And even when I'm doing this summit, part of me is like worried, like I have to be perfect. And then I was just like, no, like I built this business. I started this. I'm going to be myself, and I don't care. People are coming here because of what we've created. And when you are convicted in who you are, you become so much less afraid of what that means, and so much less afraid of what the universe is like, the world, society is saying about who you should be. And you just show up as the greatest person that you are. And that, it shines, and it gives you confidence, and you just don't care anymore. So start practicing self-care and self-love and self-appreciation. I know I'm totally going opposite of what Dylan said. He's like, let's be aggressive. So it's the same emotion, right? It's energy in motion. It's power. It's because I'm the same way. Like, I'll aggressively defend all my clients. Like, if you come at them, like I'm like a mama tiger, like I'll rip you to shreds, dude. People can come at me and I don't care, because I've built that shield. Right. But like, I'm also like, I'll protect, and I don't care if people say I can't stand up for men's mental health. Like, I'll do it till the day I die, because I believe in the foundation of everybody being able to have these fundamental rights of emotion. They don't choose genetics. So I'll stand by that. So sorry, I got a little carried away there, but
I love that. I want to add to that is there's going to be people that define respect differently than you. And again, it's coming back to that. Like, we have this problem in our world, is that we like to define words without actually understanding what we have all come to a consensus on what the definition is, right? The dictionary. And so we become ignorant in a way to what the real word means, right? We look at like things like selfishness and selflessness, and we have connotations on those words, right? Selfishness is bad, selflessness is good. And the reality is that strip away all the connotations that you've placed upon words. There is no thing in the world that is good or bad unless you define it with that value, right? Selfishness absolutely can be very bad, but it can also be very good. That's where self-care comes from, right? Selflessness, I promise you, it can be very good, but it can also be very bad, right? It can be very bad for you. If all you do is give, guess what? You're going to be abused, right? And so when you look at respect, right? When I say respectfully aggressive, it is so important for you to have defined what respect means to you. What does it mean for you to be respectful to someone? Because someone is going to look at you and say, that's disrespectful. And you are the only one that knows your intention. So if you look at their definition of disrespect and dismiss your definition, you're going to hurt yourself, right? Because you're only looking at one side of the picture, and you have to be able to look at yours and theirs, compare and translate, right? Their version is unrealistic, mine is realistic, or mine is unrealistic and theirs is more realistic, and I need to have this conversation. And so it's really important that when you become aggressively respectful, right, about these conversations, is that you pay attention to self, and then you also understand and you place within what you've gone through or what they're talking about, and you place an understanding on what they're trying to tell you, what they're trying to say, and you determine whether it matches your level of respect or your definition of respect or not. And if it doesn't, that's when I become dismissive, right? I'll point out, here's your definition of respect, here's mine. And if you don't agree with it, I'm sorry, we can't have a conversation, because you can't have a conversation that with someone that doesn't want to define common language. It's just that simple. And so you have to create your own tribe, right? And that's what I've done. That's what Elise has done. Obviously, she's got all of these men coming to this place right now and having these conversations. She's making her tribe, right? There's not a bunch of people that disagree with Elise right here, right? There's a bunch of people that agree with Elise and are trying to change the narrative of what we've been doing. And if other people don't agree, they can fuck off, right? Like, I can try to explain it all I want. I do that on TikTok all the time. So does she. But if they don't agree, I can't waste time trying to change someone's mind that doesn't want to be changed, when I could be helping someone like yourselves understand how to find a path forward, how to help themselves, how to develop themselves, focus on the right direction. That's what is so important about this. And it starts with defining the words that you're operating with.
Yes. And I love that. And just defining as in also understanding what you were taught about them.
Yep.
Too, right? Like, what does money mean to you? What does divorce mean to you? What does aggression mean to you? Because somebody brought up, thank you. It's, people are taught like, oh, don't be aggressive. But that was like the same thing with like alcohol to me. Like alcohol to me meant your life is over, you're a failure, you're a disappointment, you're not present, like all of these things. And while I wouldn't recommend like alcohol is like a good thing for you because it's literally poison to your body. For me, I had to fight that narrative because it was controlling my every action. It was making me be very judgmental. So look at what words mean to you, and you can also heal your behaviors and beliefs by doing that. So we're going to go into the last question, guys, by Brian. And Brian, I'm going to generalize this a little bit because it is very personal. And so, what the question is discussing is, how do we get to a place that we can feel safe sharing when we're terrified that the other person will view me as a weak man to be emotional, when we've experienced past trauma or abuse. So much of us want to share, but we're terrified of their reaction. And once again, I generalize that to protect your identity in the future. This will be recorded, so didn't know if you want that shared.
You start with someone you won't have that reaction from, right? That's what me and Elise are here for, right? Like, if you don't believe that you can share with the person that you connect with, or that you're supposed to be connecting with, if you don't feel safe there, you start with someone that is safe. And that's why me and Elise both step out onto our platforms and we speak and we share and we talk about these things, because again, like Elise was saying earlier, she's the tiger, right? She's sitting there willing to fight for you, right? Same as me, right? I've built my entire platform. Everything that I have done has been, in part to understand myself, but also to help people understand that there are people out there that get it, that understand, that are not going to sit here and judge you, that are not going to push unsolicited advice upon you, right? We're not here for that. We're here to create a space and show you that you can share these things, even if you fucked up, right? Because we all have fucked up. We've all made mistakes. We've all done the wrong thing at some point. And when we look at this, we have to have the ability to share somewhere. We have to have the ability to feel safety somewhere. If you can't find it out inside your relationship, find it within someone that is literally doing this for other people, literally doing this for a job, for work, right? If you have a therapist, if you have Elise, if you have me, use us, right? That is the place to begin, right? Because that is a foundational place, a safe place, right? Like, as much as we made fun of safe places when they came of existence in early 2010 era, that's what we're creating, right? Like, It's funny that we get to this point with men that we're trying to give you safe places. I was taught to make fun of safe places, in my youth. And the reality is we fucking need them, right? Because we genuinely feel like we can't do that with all the people in our lives. And so this is what this is for. And it's so important for you. It's so important for you. And I'm not going to guarantee that it works out for you and your wife, but don't do it for her. Do it for you, because that's like, again, you're the only person that's going to live with yourself your entire life. You're it. Your wife may not make it, right? You might get divorced. She might die. You might live on for a long time beyond your wife. And so you have to make sure that you start fundamentally with yourself and you give when you can, right? But you can't give if you can't understand how to connect with yourself. And so you start with someone that is willing to sit with you, that's literally made it their life mission, right? Like Elise is sitting across from me. This is her life mission, right? This is what she is here for. Utilize her, utilize me. That's what we do. And it matters to us clearly, right? Like we're both kind of getting that emotional feeling here because I mean, this matters to us, right? Like I wanted to provide, I get messages from like mothers who are like, my child is 6 years old and his father just committed suicide. I mean, fuck, that hits, right? Like I get those messages and it's like, these things, this is why I do this. This is why I feel these things, is because I want to give that kid a chance that I never had, right? I want to give that kid, right? I want to give that father a chance that my father never had. And sometimes all it is just a place to talk, right? Sometimes all it is a place to express themselves and to share what needs to be shared and to come at it logically for a moment and to sit with someone that is actually going to look at us and say, listen, you're a good human being, right? You've made mistakes, but that doesn't define where you go and the identity that you build in the future. And if you have nowhere else, start with us. That's what we do, right? That's all I'll say about that. Otherwise, I'll keep crying.
Yeah, just you're always bringing the waterworks over here, But I mean, I just agree wholeheartedly with Dylan. That's what I was going to say as well is, like I brought up earlier, sometimes our friends and our family aren't the best places to start because they don't have the tools. And what you really need is someone to validate your pain, because clearly you have so much pain within and that pain and you're expressing that pain. And that's why even right now you felt safe enough to ask that question because, we're here holding that space for you. But you really need a dedicated person to say, I can't imagine what that was like for you. And, your pain is valid. And what that provides for you as well is the ability to understand it yourself and then communicate it to your wife. Right now, if you don't have that person and you want to communicate something to your wife, you can tell her, hey, I'm realizing I'm going through a lot of things right now and I want to express them to you. But I have all these fears. You can tell your wife, if you feel comfortable telling your wife that, hey, I have these fears of thinking, you're going to think I'm weak. You're going to think I'm not a man. Yeah. And see how she responds to that. Because if she responds to that in a way that makes you feel safe, then you know that you can share it with her, right? And if she doesn't, then that's your clue to get a therapist, to get a coach, to get somebody who is going to validate that for you. Because like Dylan said, it's for you. It's for you, it's for you, it's for you. And that person might not have the tools, but that doesn't mean that you don't deserve to get help. Yep. That doesn't mean that you do not deserve to get help. If anybody's watching this in the recording, just because somebody else doesn't have the tools does not mean you don't deserve to get help. So I'm gonna leave my last words at that. Yep. We are like way past time, guys. And thank you so much, Dylan, for giving your all tonight. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us.